Ask Me Anything. Welcome back, everybody, to another special episode of The Hopeful Majority. Today, we've made it to 500 subscribers, which is a milestone for us. That means that now there's more people than my mom just watching. And today, we have a very special episode where we actually ask you that you can ask us anything about what we're building, what we're growing on this show, where we're trying to fight polarization on a daily basis. And most importantly, you're like, who cares about this guy? Why would I ask him anything? I help lead the largest student dialogue movement in the entire country. We have 130 college chapters, Bridge USA. We work with over 30,000 students across the country. We've been on a press tour recently where we're talking about what it means from MSNBC to Fox to Chris Cuomo to podcasts about how do you elevate and empower a new generation to actually have conversations instead of conflict in a moment where it looks incredibly divided and incredibly toxic. And by the way, if you're new to the show and you're on YouTube and you're like, what is this eagle doing? I'm in Jackson, Wyoming right now. And what better than to have a stuffed animal bald eagle just, serenading the special episode. So let's get into it. We've got some amazing questions. We have 5 questions. I think we're going to do one question per 100 subscribers. And if you're interested in asking questions in the future, remember, you can simply follow us on Manu Meel _ on Instagram or subscribe on YouTube, drop a question, and we'll get to it. First question. How does the Bridge USA team use artificial intelligence for work, if at all? Yes, guys, I have to admit it. We do use AI now. Well, part of the problem is if you don't use AI, you're falling behind in terms of the work capacity that people can actually generate. But here's what's fascinating. We're actually working on artificial intelligence applications with other companies and organizations that help us have more constructive dialogues. I think that AI can either be used for good or for bad. It's like any other tool, yet it's probably one of the most powerful tools we've ever experienced in the history of humanity. So what does that mean for bridge building? It means, what would it mean to have a chatbot that actually allows someone to practice a conversation with someone on the other side on, let's say, the issue of Israel-Palestine. We've also thought about utilizing AI to actually fact check. And more importantly, because fact checking gets a little bit weird, especially around the censorship stuff, how do you actually think about what is right information and wrong information in terms of how you're interpreting it? Finally, AI, I think, actually can also allow us to be more media literate. And what I mean by that is we get inundated with a fire hose of information. And the problem with that fire hose of information is that you don't actually know how to sift through it all. I don't. It's crazy. And it's hard to figure out what the truth is or what the real source is. And I think if AI used for good, it can be deployed towards a lot of those things. So there's a lot there. I'm going to pause really quickly. You can ask us a question if you like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're someone that is listening to us on Spotify and Apple, you can drop us a comment, drop us a review, because that's how we build the show together. The reason why the show is called The Hopeful Majority is because the hopeful majority of people, there's most of us in the country, want to be able to have a conversation in our country where we actually solve our problems and bridge our divides. Nobody likes the level of division we're at. And I think nothing can be better encapsulated by the second question we have, which is from actually one of our chapter leaders who's also a subscriber. They asked very simply, are you a normie? Well, part of me is like, maybe. I'm also kind of a boomer at heart. I mean, I have a typewriter that sits on my bookshelf in my room. So I do embrace, a little bit of getting offline, being able to actually read, touch grass. That's why I'm in Wyoming right now. But here's where they actually mean by this question. For the longest time, people would say, oh, if you are bridging divides, you don't have strong views. How could you have ideological conviction while talking to someone that is different than you? And I couldn't think of a more head-ass concept, because one of the greatest thinkers of our time, C.S. Lewis, talked about how intelligence is the ability for humans to hold 2 conflicting ideas at once in our brains. I might have a very strong view on whether or not the bald eagle should be the national bird of the United States. And yet, that does not mean that I can't sit in a room to understand why someone thinks that the falcon should be the national bird of the United States. And that can, by the way, be escalated to really hot button issues. On a daily basis, our chapters host conversations on things like Israel-Palestine, on very difficult topics like abortion, gun control, on student debt. The goal of a bridging conversation, and that's why we're not normies. In fact, I think we're cutting edge and countercultural. We say that in the time when everyone is telling you to flick a middle finger to the other side, we say, sit down and listen, because we need to understand why people of very different viewpoints actually believe what they believe. What a profound concept, right? Not really. And that's what we're about. And so if it's normie to say it is the most courageous thing at this American moment to listen to people that are different than us when everyone else that is loud is telling us to shout, I think that's actually fundamentally revolutionary. And that's the key. So, next question. Do you hope to have kids one day? Why? Why not? Oh my God, it's so nice to get questions about, life that aren't necessarily politics and about Bridge USA or the hopeful majority. But the way I think about this is I was actually watching a video recently from a YouTuber named Mark Manson, and he's someone that I listen to a lot because he's got some interesting views, and he talked about how there's two deaths in life. One is your physical death, and the second is the death when people that have lived after you forget who you are. Your memory's lost. And it was really fascinating to think about because I think the fundamental goal of the human project is for us to continue and advance humanity. That's why I love the work that I do with Bridge USA. I fundamentally believe and love in the American experiment. And I think the American experiment fails if we can't talk to each other. To me, it's that simple. That's why I do my work. And so I would love to have kids one day. And more importantly, I think the value of kids, I'd probably maybe two. I think two is probably a good number. But mainly because I had three. I was three. There was myself, my sister, my brother, but we were spaced really far apart. Some of my good friends are only kids, and they're like, please, God help us. Sometimes it gets lonely. So two sounds about right. But I also think it's about laying the foundation for what not only your legacy is, but making sure that you have deeper purpose in life. I think what kids allow us to do is that they also give us, if we take that responsibility very seriously and importantly, is they allow us to understand that there's a deeper meaning and purpose behind the work we do on a daily basis. And I hope to have and continue to build that purpose. And I love family, man. I love people. It's part of why I do this work. And if I had the privilege and frankly the responsibility ever of having kids with someone, I would deeply, deeply welcome that. Next question. What is the best way to carry out the Bridge mission for recent graduates? I know most of the people that listen to the show are not students, but they're actually adults or folks like yourself that are driving to work, listen to the show. And the reason why I love this question is because this begs the question of identity. Bridging does not end in college. Absolutely not. What we're actually doing is we're creating an identity of curiosity, of building, of people that are fundamentally open-minded. Regardless of your politics, we're building an identity that sits above our politics, and that's really powerful. And that identity should absolutely carry beyond college campus. In fact, we get requests all the time from workplaces, from corporations. They're like, Manu, we need to teach people how to be able to have disagreements and conversations in fundamentally divided times, because if we don't, we're going to be stuck in a quagmire. Businesses are losing money because they don't have teams that can listen to each other. Doctors reach out to us because physicians have to talk to their patients about things like vaccine mandates and public health regulations that are now fundamentally politicized. And God help me, if I was a doctor and I had to also talk about politics, I might bash my head against the wall because I never asked for that. But that's why bridging actually extends beyond college. There's also fundamental great organizations like Braver Angels out there that you should absolutely check out, and others that are doing a lot of work where once you're past college, you can actually have these conversations in our community. Our vision is imagine a world 10, 15, 20 years down the line where every chief of staff to a U.S. member of Congress came from a Bridge USA chapter when they were in college. Imagine how powerful that would be, because they would have an identity around bridge building, even though they're a Republican or Democrat, and they should have a Republican or Democrat or whatever identity. They should be strongly convicted. But if people are actually focused on listening and curiosity, aligned with the idea that we have to believe strong things, that could be incredibly powerful. I share that vision with you because I think we're at a unique opportunity where people are looking for this work in their community. So if you're listening to the show, absolutely build the hopeful majority. Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving's around the corner, guys. 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Politics is going to come up. So it's an identity that extends beyond the show and beyond campus, and we succeed together. It is not possible without you. Last question. Save the thorniest one for last. Why should we bridge with people if they won't do the same with us? Man, it's a tough question. The way I think about this is, if someone doesn't give me the respect to sit down across the table, why should I give them the respect? I wrestle with this question a lot, and it's a tough one, but the fundamental follow-up I would ask is, what is the alternative? Is there an alternative? If we don't reach out, if we don't make the attempt, if we don't listen, the country is only headed in one direction. This is the most ambitious experiment in the history of humanity because it's unlikely to succeed. I love this experiment. I want it to succeed, but the idea that you have 330 million people with different views, different backgrounds, heavily armed, trying to make it work, is so fundamentally awesome and aspirational that if we don't make the attempt to have the conversation, the experiment falls apart because no one has told me what the better alternative to conversation is. And we see it with tragic assassinations of someone like Charlie Kirk, the 2 lawmakers in Minnesota, people from across the political spectrum. Political violence is the alternative and escalating violence. But here's the second thing. I actually think most people do want to have the conversation. I think that we oftentimes assume that a conversation, let's say with a friend or a family member, is going to turn into like some debate with Tucker Carlson or Don Lemon or someone, right? When actually, I think most people just want to be heard. They want to have trust. They want to be able to listen. They want to be able to have a conversation. And so if you actually extend a line of trust to someone, I would bet you that you'd be surprised at how willing people are actually to listen. So don't judge and assume that someone doesn't want to have the conversation. And I'll give you actually 4 norms. This is my little tip. You don't even have to be part of Bridge USA chapter, but here's your present as part of being a 500 subscriber, the hopeful majority, and someone that is listening all the way through on episode 110. 4 norms on how to have a conversation that you can implement in your daily lives. First, listen to listen instead of responding. Second, debate the argument, not the person. Third, we cannot interrupt or have side conversations, show respect. And fourth, people represent only themselves and not broad social groups. And that is what I will leave you with, because if you can have these conversations in your community, after college, in your lives, that's how we start to shift the divide, and that's how we start to shift the momentum. The counterculture is building and it's here. People want something different, and you are here on the ground floor of a movement, on the hopeful majority, shifting and fighting back. I'm so excited to see you next week. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful start to this week. Thank you, everybody. Here's to 1,000, then to 10,000, then to 100,000, and we'll keep growing. We'll keep growing, because you can follow us every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your content. If you want to ask a question in the future, drop it in. I'm so curious, and I learned so much from these questions. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.